My name is Jade Brown, and I'm going to be discussing the destruction of slavery and the Civil War. When Abraham Lincoln was elected president in 1861, it caused a lot of outrage and controversy as the Republican Party was running a anti-slavery platform. Lincoln wanted to keep his ties with the Union and the Confederacy, and he continued to argue and to insist that he was not trying to abolish slavery or outlaw it or anything of this sort. As a result, he still was unable to keep the Confederacy happy, and thus, in on in April 1861, they attacked Fort Sumter, and ultimately that began the Civil War. As a result, African Americans working on the naval vessels or ships took that as their chance to become freed men and women and began to flee to the north. As the war went on and things continued to get out of hand, as the North wasn't prepared to necessarily take these people in, and there wasn't enough land and things of that sort. And they ultimately couldn't do anything about the escaping slaves. Um, so, as there was nothing necessarily there to outlaw fugitive slaves against escaping or whatever there may be, the Union ran out of things to do with them, and some of them began to force them to join the war, volunteer in the war effort, while others rejected the idea and wanted nothing to do with it. As they as as the Northern Army began to get closer and closer to the South, more and more slaves began to flee the Union and come across into the Confederacy. Though the government tried to help them out and give them land and things of that nature, there wasn't enough to go around, which caused even more controversy and outrage. Where there was land for them, they attempted to open schools and things to help freed men and women and give them education while the war effort lasted, while others were considered outlaw or contraband. 2 years later, in 1862, Lincoln provided a rough draft of ultimately what was to become the Emancipation Proclamation. In that draft, it proposed that only some slaves would be free, which again caused more outrage and controversy and was ultimately completely unfair. As the war went on, they continued to say that it wasn't about slavery or the effort to abolish it, but more so it was about disagreeing with either the Union or the Confederacy. There were various other reasons for the war effort, including not agreeing with whichever side, having a problem with the federal government in general, the economy, and so on. But they all ultimately led back to the slaves. I mean, slaves were bringing in money, people, they were starting to gain knowledge of how to escape. Lincoln was for them but wouldn't outwardly say it. All of these things were causing such controversy. As changes were made to the Constitution, more and more things went on. I'm sorry, my PowerPoint keeps freezing. Many of the states began to declare themselves that they would not free their slaves, that they would continue to keep them. Georgia, Mississippi, and so on. All these states began to succeed. The first four were Virginia, Arkansas, North Carolina, and Tennessee. Then the follow there was Maryland, Delaware, and so on. Though many of the states in their declaration to secede the Union stated that while slavery wasn't their only reason, and they had plenty of other grievances, anti-slavery or pro-slavery was a major reason for them deciding to leave the Union. And slavery was very important and vital to the South because it was a big aspect of that community and the economy. All the agriculture, cotton, tobacco, and so on. Slavery. Many reasons that slavery began to end was because while there became a less need for cotton, tobacco began to take over in the agriculture industry. The South wanted to assert their rights against the federal government, and so they didn't feel that they had to support the rule to abolish slavery or the law to abolish slavery or the motion. They felt that they were under their own control and of their own command, I guess you would say. They also wanted slavery to expand westward, and the North wanted the western states to continue to be free. They didn't feel like slavery needed to migrate that way. When Lincoln was elected president, as he was considered to be a part of the Republican Party, and the Republican Party was an anti-slavery platform, the South began to panic and began to be outraged and took that as a step towards abolishing slavery, and as a result they began to take action, which again would have led back to the attack on Fort Sumter, South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Texas, and Virginia succeeding all between December and April of 1860 and 1861. South Carolina's secession ultimately was the result of, or resulted in, the attack on Fort Sumter. That was their way of demanding that the United States abandon all military forts in their Charleston harbor. There is a lot of debate and controversy over whether slavery was the sole reason or the major cause of the Civil War still today, as many people are unsure whether that was the root or if people were just generally unhappy with the Confederacy and the Union. As I stated before, a lot of it does go back to the fact that slavery had a role in the economy. People were gaining more knowledge and were given more chances to free themselves. The North was against slavery and migrating to the West. The Republican Party was basing its campaign on ending slavery. The president, who was the newly elected president, was a part of the Republican Party, and while he wouldn't flat out say that he was against slavery, he clearly supported it. And eventually he wrote the Emancipation Proclamation, which abolished slavery. While they didn't actually use those words, slavery wasn't really used.